Fellas, what's going on? It's the last good man in Jersey, here with a message to help you win. Today is another episode in the MGTOW series. We're going to talk about what MGTOW really means to you and whether you as a MGTOW can get what you want by just going to places where what you want already exists. Before we jump into this episode about the Philippines, click like, click subscribe. And with that out of the way, let's start a conversation. First off, just to level set, I always like to do this in case this is your first episode. I do not consider myself to be a true MGTOW. When I think about MGTOW, it's kind of rejecting the way marriage works today and walking away from marriage, because marriage laws are overwhelmingly biased towards women. It's rejecting the dating scenarios that you have today, where women who are largely going after the most beautiful guys possible don't seem to bring their expectations back down to reality until they've aged out. Rejecting kids, because kids typically require wives, and wives can lead to divorces, and the very kids that you wanted to have are suddenly taken away from you. So yeah, the whole idea behind MGTOW I get, but I'm not fully there. I am divorced, so had a wife. I have a child. I'm very happy about the fact that I have a child. If I didn't have a child at this point in my life, I would darn sure be working towards having one, because I know what that means. Not everyone is in this camp, and we've talked about MGTOWs. I've talked about MGTOWs I've known. Some who've lived lives that were very happy, and some who've lived lives with some regrets. What I want to do today, though, is think about something a little bit more specific. Okay. Now, men going their own way. Why are men going their own way? Basically, I hear two types of MGTOWs. One type is the guy who says, I am going to be very focused on my personal happiness. I'm going to live a life of pleasure and enjoyment, and I don't want anything to tie me down. I want to be as selfishly focused on what I want as possible. And those are the MGTOWs who seem to be very happy with their situations in life. What I mean is, as they're, turning 50 plus, they're looking at their lives and saying, yes, this has been a life well lived. The other type, and this is really the importance, is the MGTOW who can't find what he wants in Western women. You want a relationship, you just don't want to deal with Western attitudes towards what men are responsible for, kind of traditional men with modern women, divorce, all of the headaches that can be associated with dating women who may not even be interested in you, but do see you as a worthwhile date. Gotta take a commercial break. Okay. Now, if you're MGTOW because you can't find what you want in the West, the question is, have you considered looking in other places? Let's frame this up a bit. If I told you that you could have the perfect wife and it would cost you $50,000, would that be worth it? That might be too much. Or you might say, you know what, if $50,000 meant that I got the perfect wife, sure, that's money well spent. That's infinitely worth the value. Okay. Is there a number on it? 50,000? What about 25,000? What about 10,000? What about 6,000? Why am I drilling down to these numbers? Well, we're going to talk about that in a second, but kind of the real core question you need to ask yourself, that I'm asking is, are you MGTOW because you don't want relationships, or are you MGTOW because you don't want Western relationships? I think we'll all acknowledge that there are some differences here. Just take a look at what's going on with the West and with the perceptions of men that seem to reverberate through YouTube and all social media about men in the West or women in the West and how they want to date. Traditional women, exotic women. What do you think about that? As you can glean from the title, we're going to talk about the Philippines today. A haven for some of the traditional women you might be looking for. Now, right off the bat, I'm going to admit, I am not an expert on the Philippines. While I have been out to Indonesia in general, I haven't been to the Philippines specifically. I can say that I was impressed with what I saw in Indonesia, but apparently that pales in comparison to the Philippines. I'll also take a minute to acknowledge a podcaster who has a lot of content about the Philippines, the dating dynamics, the mindset of the women there, the pros and cons of being a Westerner in the Philippines versus having a Filipino wife or a relationship back here in the States. There's a lot of complexity there. The Filipina P is a great person to talk to about the pros and cons of that. However, here are my questions for you. What do you want out of a relationship? Loyalty? Someone who you feel is absolutely, positively not going to look to divorce you the second things don't go their way? Femininity? Someone who's just pleasant to be around and is feminine and is not constantly challenging you for the reins. Someone who's traditional, believes in cooking, believes in cleaning, believes in letting the man take the lead, especially when the man is the provider and all she's being asked to do is be a good homemaker. Are those the types of things you're looking for? Are some of those the types of things you're looking for? Well, did you know that that's the norm in the Philippines? The traditional definition of a wife is the norm there. Let's stop and think about that for a second, because that raises a question. If you want traditional, and the reason you're going your own way is because you can't find traditional, well, why not go to the Philippines? We're putting some period stamps on this, but we're still living in the age of COVID, where most people seem to be working from home at least part of the time. And quite honestly, working from home just means working from wherever your laptop is, which could be anywhere in the world. If you were in the Philippines for a month, how much do you think that's going to cost? Round trip tickets are $2,000. And that's assuming you don't hang out and wait for cheap airfares. Nice hotels, $100 a night. Again, that's without focusing on deals and discounts and other things that you can do. So a month in the Philippines, $5,000 plus expenses, which a very top level analysis.
But you also have to pay thousands to maintain it every month.
So, okay, now we've got a situation where For $6,000, you are in the Philippines surrounded by exotic, traditional women. If you're not attracted to Filipino women, well, this doesn't really apply to you. But if you are, Filipino women seem to be incredibly attracted to foreign men. Not just for financial gain either. In the same way that Filipinas here can seem exotic, when we go there, we are exotic. And that makes us interesting. Age gap dating, not as big a deal there. Boring, balding, all the things that you might think make you unattractive here are fine there. Your gray hairs can suggest wisdom, experience, and understanding of the world. You can suddenly become the hottie on the strip that everybody's interested in. And they'll aggressively pursue you. If you could find what you're looking for, would that be worth the search? And if so, is $6,000 worth it? I'm not going to argue with you about whether or not $6,000 seems like it's going to land you in the kind of relationship that you actually want. I'm going to suggest that you look at the Filipina piece content and be the judge for yourself. Because what I found in looking at her content is that she's very objective. She gives you the good, she gives you the bad. And when you start to think about city girls versus province girls, living there versus bringing them back here, you can really start to build a map of the situations that seem like they would work the best, situations that you want versus don't want, and you could find yourself happy. The challenge to guys who are MGTOW is to ask yourselves the question: are you MGTOW because you don't want the relationship, or are you MGTOW because you haven't found the relationship that you actually do want? If it's the latter, let's start to think about where we might be able to find that relationship, because that could put you in a much better place than not. There's going to be more to this. There are lots of other regions that can boast traditional women who are interested in foreign men. I'm starting with the Philippines because, well, there's no language barrier. And as I look at the different regions, if I was 30, I would be going to the Philippines pretty much tomorrow and securing one of these traditional wives while I still could, because it's only a matter of time before that well runs dry.